What is cloud waste and how big is this problem?
Most teams or products have been observed that they are not even using 60% of the CPU that they bought in the cloud, right? And most of these organizations are underutilizing 30 to 40% of their commitments, long-term commitments and reserved instances as well.
Who are part of the FinOps team and who controls it? Basically, who is the owner of FinOps team or the practice?
Every cloud vendor, or you can say FinOps vendors, they all have fancy dashboards that where you can see your data, you can know what's going good or wrong. But eventually, there are lots of things which are on the back end.
So, from a BA perspective, who is watching this episode, so they have to look at the monthly usage pattern or the data. So, and they sit down with the stakeholders who are actually responsible for the users. What kind of questions BAs can ask? Is it also useful for BAs to ask saying, okay, what are you planning where there's a likely spike in the future? Black Friday sale, New Year's sale. Is it a legit question to ask?
I can break it down into two questions. So first question is about the business needs. Over-optimizing or over-utilizing the FinOps practices or totally focusing upon cost savings is not an ideal choice for many enterprises.
Then what is the best metric to really look at the cloud value? Because that becomes very important rather than just focusing on one metric, that cost.
It's a typical question and it's a very complex one because AI is an optimizer and an optimization candidate as well.
So migrating to cloud platforms actually provided economies of scale to enterprises. But it has also resulted into a problem of overspending on the cloud. Most of the enterprises are not using the full spend done on the clouds. So cloud waste has become a big problem in the industry. And that is where comes FinOps. It's a way you can manage and optimize the uses of cloud. And this is what we are going to do in this episode. So welcome to a brand new episode of Future Forward, a podcast series by Techcanvass on artificial intelligence, business analysis, and product management. Let me introduce today's guest, Naval Kush. He's a seasoned cloud governance manager at Amdocs, recognized as a LinkedIn top voice, and widely known for his thought leadership across multi-cloud governance, FinOps, and IT service excellence. He's a passionate public speaker and community builder, frequently sharing insights that help organizations modernize cloud operations and drive responsible, scalable tech transformation. Hi, Naval. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Abhishek.
So, I just talked about you a little bit. Can you tell us a little more about you? Because you are doing a lot of stuff. So, please tell our viewers, what are you doing currently?
Sure. So first of all, thanks Abhishek for this opportunity. It's a pleasure, having talked with you. So about myself, so I have about 13 years of IT industry experience under different roles. So I've worked with multiple organizations, whether service-based, product-based, BFSI, and now in telco. So these days I'm in charge of the cloud governance function at Amdocs, where I take care of multi-cloud governance, including strategizing, evangelizing, and understanding what is going on in the industry, helping adopt new frameworks, and also inventing new things that doesn't exist. For example, automations, governance guardrails, and everything related to, including the topic we have today, FinOps. So I'm responsible for all of these. We have an ecosystem where we build things. We are the architects, and we are also in charge of the governance as well for anything which is cloud.
Okay. So now let's start with the basics of the topic. So the first thing which I also mentioned in my introduction earlier, what is cloud waste and how big is this problem?
So, Abhishek, cloud waste is basically the wasted spend we have in the cloud usage across the globe. So, for example, you can say around 25 to 35% of the cloud spend globally is being wasted, right? So, as per a recent survey done by Data Stack Hub, FinOps Weekly, FinOps Foundation, all the industry bodies we have, right? So, they have noticed in their surveys and they have received feedback from all the global organizations that are using the cloud. So the top sources for these kind of waste are, you can say, under or oversized instances in the cloud, compute instances, underutilized Kubernetes nodes, non-prod environment sprawl, that are usually running in the off business hours that are not needed, network costs, and of course these days AI workloads. So, for example, recently you can say most teams or products have been observed that they are not even using 60% of the CPU that they have bought in the cloud, right? And most of these organizations are underutilizing 30 to 40% of their commitments, long-term commitments, and reserved instances as well. So this type of usage not only generates waste, but it results in patterns of uncertainty where businesses don't follow where their investments are being dumped or used, and nobody has any clarity around that.
So, from a business perspective, okay, why it is difficult to get into a situation where there is a waste, that means they're overspending. Why can't they manage it better? So, what's the problem, and what is your prognosis on that?
Okay, so I sense your question is more around how it is different from the traditional IT budgeting, right? The on-premise world. So the cloud spend is usually harder to manage because it's by design different from the traditional IT budget that we used to see, because it's more consumption based, decentralized, and dynamic. Okay, so earlier we used to predict what kind of usage we are going to have in a financial year, and we used to pay for that, or we used to procure hardwares and softwares and resources just to use that, just to spin up our infrastructures. Now, anyone, literally any developer or any team in your organization can spin up instances, can procure new cloud accounts and resources on the go, right? So they can do it instantly without any financial guardrails or guilt. So costs can therefore spiral long before even finance or any other accounts team can see that. So nobody has visibility and nobody has any control over that.
Okay. So now let's talk about the next important concept, FinOps. That's the primary topic. So what is FinOps exactly?
Uh, FinOps is a set of best practices and its associated operating model that basically unifies different personas in finance, engineering, and product, or you can say business analyst equally, to make cost aware and data driven cloud decisions. So it basically enables financial accountability and capability directly into engineering groups, workflows, ensuring that every technical decision is evaluated through the lens of business value and not just technicality.
So then, why can't we leave the billing to the finance department, okay, or managing the spend to the finance department? Because ultimately they do all the management, right? Why there is a dedicated department or a practice which is being developing as FinOps?
So earlier, the finance team that we used to have, the core finance team or the legacy finance team, they were very capable of managing your entire IT budget because they had the control, right? So they knew what requests are incoming into from the business or the engineering teams. They knew what to procure. They had visibility into the future. They knew the trends in forecasts. So everything was under direct financial control, and you can say the CFO and additionally the CIO. These days we have lost that control because the cloud is very dynamic. So you can say that everybody who's using cloud, as I said, any developer, even an entry level developer who has access to your cloud account, can request any super expensive EC2 instance, let's say in AWS, right, or virtual machines in Azure or in Google. So they can instantly demand anything and they'll get it. And finance, they don't need to seek finance team's approval anymore. So what's happening is, because finance does not control anything now, they have to rely on engineering functions and workflows and their automations to get these kind of financial insights, because now they don't have to seek approvals. Okay, everything is being run independently by the development and engineering functions. So eventually finance cannot do anything. They can only act as an advisor or a consultant. They can support it. They can support the advanced budgeting. They can support the FinOps processes. They can support the you can say the retrospective introspections into what went wrong. But they can't approve or deny anything in the cloud. So that's why we need a dedicated finance function who has the knowledge, accountability, ownership, and authority to help drive the overall cloud expenses.
Right. So a related question on that. So who are part of the FinOps team? Okay, and who controls it? Basically, who is the owner of FinOps team or the practice?
So Abhishek, FinOps is basically not owned by anyone, to be honest. FinOps is a shared accountability model. as is the cloud. So what happens is engineering teams or groups usually own their day-to-day usage and operations and optimizations. Okay, they know what they're spending. They are expected to know and be accountable for what they're spending. However, they are not expected to be FinOps experts, right? So engineering plays a role where they take the accountability of their infrastructure and architectures. Finance take the leads on budgeting and forecasting. So finance, as I said earlier, finance basically will enable the engineering team to have a visibility into what they're doing, to do the retrospectives, to do the analysis, to do the maths, the calculations, and help them understand what is going good and what is going wrong. Do we have any forecasted patterns? Do we have a logic? Do we have a visibility into the past and the future? That's what finance can help them do. Okay. In addition to that, product or business analysts play a very vital role because they are the people who can actually monitor everything every day. Okay, they can act as the added advisory layer to the finance team. They can basically create these kind of workflows and systems to monitor what's going around in the systems. Okay, because finance is usually responsible for the commercial side of the things, not technicalities. Business analysts will act as a bridge between finance and engineering to translate the business and technical logics and bring out a good business outcome or a value, right? So you can say that in a mature organization, all these three groups or functions will have to work together because no single team can eventually make FinOps successful on their own. We have to make an amalgamation of all the three functions.
Correct. So cloud billing is a pretty complex thing, right? So generally, most of the cloud providers have a dashboard, which is too technical for everyone to understand. So let's say there's an analyst who is trying to kind of either simplify that, build something on top of it, so that the organization can understand who is spending on the cloud. So how should they approach this, the business analyst or the analyst?
Okay. So you rightly said that every cloud vendor, or you can say FinOps vendors, they all have fancy dashboards that you can where you can see your data, you can know what's going good or wrong. But eventually, there are lots of things which are on the back end. For example, patterns, forecasting, as I said. So what happens is usually the engineering teams or the developers, they operate on a very highly scaled environment which can go up and down. You can say, big billion day sales, Black Friday sales, and all that. So the business patterns usually can vary. So you cannot say that the usage of the cloud that you have today would be the same tomorrow or the next week or the next month. So the patterns are usually varied. What is happening in this scenario where BAs are required is BAs can easily translate cloud billing not just from the dashboard but from various sources using the raw metrics, but by obviously going beyond the raw metrics and focusing more on uncovering things that are not visible. For example, uncovering patterns, identifying anomalies, okay, detecting ways that usually the operations or the engineering teams would miss to monitor. They connect these dots or insights to underlying business drivers. For example, rather than simply reporting on basic usage or statistics of the cloud, BS can analyze the cloud billing dashboards from the vendors or from their FinOps tools to spot trends which may signal inefficiencies, or you can say they can help identify the opportunities for optimization. They would look for unusual spikes or anomalies that are missed to be monitored in their day-to-day operations, inconsistent usage across different departments, because obviously one product cannot be same as the different second product. So these kind of deviations from unexpected consumption, or you can say, as I said, unpredicted business patterns, and then they have to work together with the engineering functions and finance to understand what is the ultimate root cause behind these real spikes in the cloud. So the spikes could be anything, and they could be obviously known or unknown. Nobody can control that. But somebody has to be the translator between these things, and somebody has to be the investigator of these things. So the BS can act as that investigator, and they can obviously come up with a solution as well.
Okay. So let's be a little more specific. So from a BA perspective, who is watching this episode, okay, so they have to look at the monthly usage pattern or the data. So and they sit down with the stakeholders who are actually responsible for the users. What kind of a questions BS can ask?
Okay, so BAs can be focused both on the engineering and finance side, right? So the questions could be different, but on a general note, most of the questions from the BAs would go to the engineering department or the development teams, and the questions could be as simple as asking for as I said, they generally would help uncover the unknown spikes or the anomalies, right? So the first question would to the engineering group would be what grew in the recent times and why. For example, if you have an unnoticed spike in the compute or storage, something would have went wrong. Let's say you upgraded your product, okay, you had a new release and you had to spin up some few instances last night. What happened and why it was not part of the bill of material initially? Because whenever you are initiating a new project, usually initiating a new project on an architecture, a BOM is accompanied by this. BOM is called a bill of materials, and the bill of materials contains all the data about your infrastructure, what you are requesting initially, because an architecture is not something that you create overnight. Okay, it has to pass through a series of approvals, reviews from different architects, information security. There are different functions involved. So if something went above than the approved limit, initially approved architecture, somebody has to ask that. Okay, it's a difficult question. Usually, the engineering teams come up with an answer that it was the business need. So it's okay. Might be there was a real and legit business need, but somebody has to answer for that. You cannot just keep spinning up infrastructure without unnecessary business logic. Second kind of question would be trying to identify idle resources in the cloud. For example, are there any idle or unutilized resources? You have a resource that's not running a production workload, it's useless, you are just paying for that. Third question could be about commitments. Are you utilizing your commitments in the cloud well? Then are your workloads oversized? I mean, you don't have that business case, but you still are running huge workloads in the cloud. Do you really need that? You can ask questions about, did your spend outgrow business requirements? So, as I said, business needs are sometimes varying, and you really, if you don't need workloads during off business hours and why you're running it, or let's say if you talking about also AI. So if your use case or your POC can utilize a lower business model, minimum viable LLM model, why do you need an expensive LLM for that? If you're just testing something, you can use a simple demo, or a minimum viable LLM, and then you can scale it up later when you move to production, right? So you don't have to pay for the production cost right from the dev side.
Correct. So these are tough questions actually for these
These are
stakeholders.
just starters. I think there could be more tougher questions when we
Correct.
get deeper into topics like cloud economics. But initially, I think this is the bare minimum that the BAs must ask.
Okay, so do the BAs also, just a related question which came to my mind? Is it also useful for BAs to ask, saying, okay, what are you planning where there's a likely spike in the future? Black Friday sale, New Year's sale. Is it a legit question to ask?
It is actually, I can break it down into two questions. So first question is about the business needs. Okay, if you have a known business need, for example, like you said, Black Friday sale or Diwali sale, Christmas sale, end of season sale, this is a legit question. Most of these sales are known in the start of the year itself, so we know when we could expect a spike. Also, in addition to the usual questions that the BAs are asking, they should also work on the back end to understand from the visibility dashboards what kind of forecast do we know. For example, in addition to this, you know that you do a tech refresh every year, right? And you are removing all those unsupported components from the cloud, and you are adding new SaaS licenses, because sometimes cloud is not just infrastructure; it is also SaaS. AI is also an optimization candidate in itself. So they also need to ask questions about these kind of known variants. Okay, known and unknown both, and also they need to make these forecast trend lines. Okay, they might use other kind of logic to build their own dashboards. Obviously they can use additional tools like Power BI or Tableau to create their own dashboard. You don't have to rely on the data that the vendor is giving to you. You can also create your own logic as per your business needs and try to understand if the logic that the vendor is giving you is different than what your business line really needs. So identifying these patterns are also important. So that's why I said first question is more on the known side and second is the unknown side.
Right. So from a BA perspective, or somebody who is involved into asking these questions, what kind of skills they need?
Skills are actually varied because now we have multiple personas involved. So as a BA, you don't just have to talk to an engineering function. You may have to talk to business functions like finance, engineering, information security, procurement as well sometimes, customers, and senior stakeholders in an organization like CFO and CIO. So the questions and the conversation that you're going to have, or the reporting that you have to do, would be different in different levels, right? So initially, obviously, you will have to start with basic cloud literacy. You have to know what cloud components are, what kind of reporting structures and billing structures the vendors are utilizing. You have to learn cost modeling. You have to learn data storytelling. You have to know what story you have to tell based upon data driven outcomes. You have to learn the architecture trade offs for understanding. For example, how does one architecture perform in comparison to others? Obviously, you don't have to know the entire architectures of the industry, but at least your product. You have to have basic understanding of your product architecture and what works well. For example, for some architectures, the Intel CPUs work fine, right? For the other ones, when we modernize things, Graviton and AMD can cut cost to half, right? So if your product can run on a Graviton instance, then why not? Okay, modernizing as well as cutting the cost down. This includes cloud service modeling, as I said, deployment types, core concepts of the cloud such as elasticity, scalability, and security controls. IAM. In addition, proficiency in cost modeling and data storytelling, as I said, is vital to this journey, because you have the data, you have the reports, you have the visibility. If you're not able to tell a story, not a fictional story, obviously a data driven story to your leadership, you will fail at the end. To be successful as a BA, you need to tell a story, you need to show them the outcomes, you need to show them the pros and cons, the weight of both, and then you need to send your recommendations to your leaders or to your teams, that these are the few technical changes I recommend in your product that will help you optimize, not just save cost but optimize. Because optimize, the word optimization of the cloud is not just about cloud cost savings, it's also related to your performance and security. So that's why all these things are basically working together to ensure that you're not just saving costs, but you're making your product better.
Right. So you mentioned about maybe evaluating the option of moving from Intel to AMDs. So this is like a saving cost, right? Which could be a value for the organization. So any specific example which you can think of where this actually led to saving for the enterprise or creating more value?
Okay, so instead of talking about CPUs, let's move to a different topic, which is storage. And it is obviously these days we are all paying for storage. Whether if you're a private cloud user, you're paying for storage somewhere with Microsoft or AWS, right? What happened in one of the enterprises is, in a recent instance, so there was a BA who was responsible for cloud FinOps recommendations, and she noticed that her organization's object storage costs were steadily increasing, and that was not increasing in a quarter, that was increasing weekly. So something was definitely going on wrong. What she did, rather than accepting this as a trend, okay, or just a marker, so what she did, she took a step back to reframe the problem. She tried to deep dive into the storage usage data from the dashboards, and working together with the engineering team to identify what was the real issue. And you will be surprised to know the real issue was the absence of a well defined data storage lifecycle policies. So it was a very simple change. So using the cloud, using the automations that are available within the vendor systems, okay, they were able to basically apply these storage lifecycle policies and automated tiering. Using this automated tiering, ultimately they were able to realize 18% savings per annum on their storage costs, because now they didn't need anybody manually to review the data, to remove the data, to archive the data, or let's say to move the some of their content from hot storage to cold storage. It was simply automated. It was just one simple automation change, and they were able to save 18% cost.
Yeah, that's a good example. So, coming to another question here. So, many organizations sometimes get too focused on reducing the cost. Okay. So, one of the downside to this entire analysis is that there is a case that, okay, reduce the cost. But if you become too kind of over focused on reducing the cost, can it lead to problems for the business?
It will. So over optimizing, or you over utilizing the FinOps practices, or totally focusing upon cost savings, is not an ideal choice for many enterprises. I will say all of them, because they would have unintended consequences. For example, while your goal may be to reduce the expenses, okay, excessive optimization opportunities will certainly slow down your innovations, because they will hamper your performance of the architecture, or they will hamper the scalability of it. So let's say that if you're trying to deploy new solutions quickly, you will not be able to do that, because if you already shortened, or you can say you undersize your compute or the infra, that will not be able to support the architectures that you're trying to build, especially the scaled ones. So this can lead to rigid systems and processes that stifle creativity. So you can say that when your market demands are changing, we just discussed different kind of situations like Black Friday sales and end of season sales. Your product is not, if that is not capable to support that kind of a workload, globally or within the region, your product eventually fails, right? Because you're not able to sell your products. Also, let's say if you are trying to upgrade your products, you will not be able to do that. If you have a sudden business market demand change and you have to cater to a new solution, you need a reduced time to market for a lot of products. With some let's say you applied a long FinOps approval chain, that will hamper your developers ability to quicken the time to market for a product. So ultimately it's hampering both your employee experience as well as your customer experience. Additionally, aggressive cost cutting measures, for example, you scale down your critical resources too far. Ultimately your performance reduces, so the customers will start experiencing lags in your product, right? Or your product will suddenly shut down when it has heavy workloads. So your reputation in the industry or in your customer base is also hampered. So less reliable services will fail to understand that or cater to the business need.
Correct. So then, what is the best metric to really look at the cloud value? Because that becomes very important rather than just focusing on one metric, that cost.
So the organizations in today's era, they because FinOps is a booming domain, right? So everybody and every leader wants to save money. It's not about saving money. It's about optimizing the real infrastructure. For example, when you're asking for metrics, when you're talking about metrics for successful metrics for cloud FinOps, it's not just metric that is about saving. It's more about things like unit economics, cost per customer, cost to serve, okay, having the better ROI. For example, if you're buying commitments, your commitment should be able to cater to a long-term business need. Otherwise, there's no use of buying commitments and reserved instances, right? So a simple cost tracking, instead of simple cost tracking for inefficiencies, you should also scale factors like performance of your product, how it is going, how your users are actually taking your product, and what is your user sentiment, your user experience at the end. When properly monitored, it will basically help you realize better ROI of your cloud versus what you're buying. For example, there are recent certifications, learning, and a lot of evolution happening around the industry around sustainability. There is also a new term after FinOps that is called GreenOps. So when we are talking about GreenOps, you're not just measuring how you use your cloud, but you're also measuring your carbon footprint and impact on the environment, right? So a lot of customers have recently started asking organizations, okay, you're doing FinOps, good. You're saving money for me, perfect. But are you sustainable? Are you harming the planet while you're utilizing these cloud data centers and warehouses? I know that you have very capable product, but if you're harming the planet, I won't buy your product because I don't have trust in your your corporate responsibilities and ethics. So sometimes these are also additional metrics that come in addition to cost savings. So it is more about the sentiment and not just money.
Okay, let's talk about a little bit ahead in the future. So, how do you see FinOps evolving as we can't live without cloud, right? With AI, now it has become even more compelling. So, how do you see this growing and the role it's going to play in the future?
Okay, so I have personally observed this domain developing from the beginning. As early as 2020s, we didn't even have the term called FinOps. Okay, we were just struggling with cloud cost because that was the time of cloud adoption. Companies and enterprises were moving from their on-premise infrastructure to the cloud. They were trying to realize benefits out of that. There were narratives around cloud that you can save cost when you move to the cloud. So in some cases, it is true. In some cases, it might be not. And that's how the term FinOps evolved. So we saw the rise of FinOps Foundation, where they shared new knowledge about this new framework and how you could adopt few practices and save cost. Initially, it focused all around the compute part of the cloud. Later on, it gradually evolved from compute to storage to network to SaaS, and now, of course, AI. So I think. as a learning from the past evolution and what's going right now in the industry, I would foresee this kind of evolution will likely involve several steps. For example, the first step, which is happening right now in the industry, is organizations are willing and trying to shift from basic cost optimization to and metrics to focusing more on business value driven outcomes. For example, they're trying to do forecasting, they're trying to adopt best practices in FinOps, they're trying to do something about their optimization. They're not happy with what they're how they are operating in the cloud. They're trying to be better, they're trying to be optimized. Now the next and obviously in the first stage they're also partnering with a lot of FinOps vendors in the industry. The second stage or the evolution of this phase would be they will now start investing in automating their routine practices, their manual work, whatever BAs are doing, whatever the finance team is doing, whatever engineering team is doing. Okay, me as the cloud governance manager, I have personally helped develop a lot of policies in the cloud, to be specific, guardrails and guidelines both around FinOps. So we sometimes we have to act as the gatekeeper. For example, if somebody is trying to buy, not buy, procure or spin up a very expensive instance in the cloud, you cannot allow and everybody to do that, right? I understand that you have to give some freedom, some liability to the teams, but let's say if your architecture does not need a super expensive resource which basically bills for hundreds of dollars per minute, you cannot do that. Maybe a high end AI application will need that, but a low end business application that just serves 550 or 100 users, you don't need such an instance for that. So you have to stop everybody from doing that. You can add a way to get an exception to procure that resource, but initially not. So these kind of guidelines are required. Also, as I mentioned, automatic storage, object storage steering is needed. Network cost, you can lower down, you can limit the tokens in the GPUs when you're using the LLM models for AI. So you can limit the tokens so that not everybody is using AI like it's for free. So investing in automations is the next step. And final stage, when everyone is obviously moved from implementation adoption to monitoring, then the last stage would be everyday reporting, strategic reporting to your executives, to your leaders, to your customers, adopting sustainability metrics like I just said, GreenOps together with FinOps, to make sure that we are more future ready. AI will be, of course, part of this journey in parallel, because AI, as I mentioned, is an optimization candidate. People are using AI like anything right now. The token costs are increasing, network costs are increasing, LLM usage cost is increasing. You have to load them. You have to limit that. In addition, AI will support you in FinOps as well. So using AI, you can get better reporting, get better visibility, get better recommendation how to save your money. AI additionally can compare your cloud cost with one vendor to another cost. So it can also give you a recommendation. Okay, this service is not cheap in your existing provider. You can maybe utilize a different cloud provider to load on your cost. So multi-cloud cost visibility is also visible, and recommendations are seamless in that case. So the FinOps Foundation, for example, calls this evolution crawl, walk, and run. So initially, when you're crawling, you're learning, you're adopting. When you're walking, you're trying to do something good, and you're trying to take everyone together with you. When I say everyone together, it is different functions in organizations like engineering and finance and procurement. And finally, when you're running, obviously you have already achieved success, and you are trying to improve your processes further. So this is the three stages of evolution of FinOps.
Okay, so the last thing you mentioned about AI, so that leads me to the next question. So AI is like a double-edged sword here, right? It can help you optimize the cost or optimize the cloud spend, but at the same time, AI itself is on the cloud, right? So that can also increase the cost of the spend. So how do you kind of balance and say, okay, do you want to bring in the intelligence so that it can help us optimize versus the additional spend on the AI?
Okay, so it's a typical question, and it's a very complex one, because AI is an optimizer and an optimization candidate as well. So now what's happening is people and enterprises, they are trying to adopt AI because everyone is doing it. They're running a race against who quickly adopts AI first. So ultimately, ROI matters on what you're able to achieve with that. So, for example, if you're utilizing a smaller LLM model that helps you gain FinOps recommendations, it's good. Okay, a lot of these things are available for free. For example, if you are using Amazon Q or Bedrock, they recently released their own MCP server for FinOps. AWS did that. And if you're trying to adopt that, it is relatively very cheap to use. and it already has all the built-in recommendations, logic, engine, everything is available for free. You just have to integrate that with your cloud usage dashboards, or you can use it within AWS systems as well as cloud native, and you can do that. You don't have to pay extra for that. But if you're trying to build your own LLM model and if you're trying to sell it like a FinOps product, it could be expensive. So it depends on your perspective. But overall, I will say, because I have used it both as an optimization candidate as well as an optimizer, I think the real value lies in what you're trying to achieve with that. So let's say if you're using AI, you're trying to optimize your GPU heavy unpredictable workloads. You don't have any control, and AI does that. Your 50 engineers were not able to do that, but AI services did that. Obviously, you have ROI rightly available on the table. But if you're using AI and you're just saving, let's say, $500, $1,000 per week, per month, it's not really valid.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I think FinOps for AI and AI for FinOps, both domains exist. We have content available over the web for both topics, and both are different streams, but both are equally important as part of the FinOps evolution. So you will have to understand that you have to bring a balance, and you'll have to learn both things: how to use FinOps for AI and how to use AI for FinOps.
Yeah. So that leads to me the next question. How does a business analyst or anybody who wants to get into FinOps domain, okay, where do they start learning? What are the options available to them?
Well, there are lots of courses available out there in the market. So you can, if you have existing licenses, you can go directly to Udemy and Coursera and you can start learning for free. I mean, if you have license. If you want to go for certifications, we have the FinOps Foundation, and they have very well came up with a lot of different options for you for the users. For example, you can start with the foundations, which is called FOCP, FinOps Certified Practitioner. Then we have the intermediate certification, which is called FinOps Certified Professional. And then after that, you have different specialized learning courses available, like FinOps for AI, FinOps for SaaS, right? So and further they have different levels: level 1, level 2, level 3. So you can go as deep as you want, but at least somebody who is just new as a BA and they want to transition their career into FinOps, at least you can start with the practitioner course. It's easy. You could hardly spend a month or two, maybe if you're a quick learner, lesser than that, and you can get easily certified. And you also have the option to get scholarships from the foundation, so you can submit the form. If you are able to get the scholarship to earn that, you could also get a chance to do it for free.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty useful for people who want to get into this space. So one last question. From an enterprise perspective, okay, what is the one thing you would say based on your experience as to they should avoid or not do to increase the cloud spend?
So I think first of all, we should stop treating cloud bill as your traditional IT bill. As I said, it is very different from the traditional on-premise way of managing the infrastructure, because it's not equal to that. So for example, managers view cloud purely as a line item of saving costs. Ultimately, if you are just trying to save cost, you are just forgetting that other other side of the things exist. For example, focusing upon immediate cost reduction will hamper your performance. If your performance is low, your users will start moving away from your product. They will lose them interest in that. Customer centricity, innovation, all that gets hampered when evaluated through the lens of FinOps, right? There comes reliability, there comes our business data driven outcomes, there comes user usage centric driven outcomes, and obviously then FinOps becomes an enabler to your enterprise and not an enemy of that. So for example, you're just not covering an overhead cost. You're not focusing upon overhead cost. You're trying to realize the real outcome of cloud as an enabler. For example, if you get into topics like cloud economics, per user spend of your infrastructure. Okay, let's say you have 50,000 users for a product. This is the per dollar spend you're doing on one user. It is really effective for a business. For you can split it into per product, you can split it into per department, you can also when you're coming to the AI, you can split it on per token as well. So you can see per dollar spent versus per dollar earned. So I think people or enterprises should stop just chasing the cloud bills. Okay, just going through the line items and trying to understand, okay, per month I have my EC2 instances cost has risen, or storage. Yes, that's important. But ultimately, are you tracking user sentiment? Are you tracking if the real business ROI is being delivered? Are you tracking if your network cost, for example, I know it is high, but are you seeing if your business is being scaled? If your network costs are rising, it could mean that your global user, your user base is rising, your customer base is rising. So in lieu of that, if you're getting back enough revenue, I don't think that's a loss, right? If you're scaling up on the other side of the continent and your product is being famous, I think that's free marketing for you.
Correct. So thank you so much, Naval. It was really nice talking to you. And I hope you must have got some good basic idea about FinOps. So FinOps is an exciting field. If you want to get into FinOps and want to know more about it, you can connect to Naval. He's quite prominent on LinkedIn. Or you can write to us. We'll be able to answer your questions. Thanks for watching this episode. See you in the next one.